Hello, world, and welcome to the Innovation Coaching Podcast. My name is Klaus Rostel, and with me today I have Mathias Hvidbj Jørgensen. Beautiful Danish name. Mathias, tell me how I can help.
Thank you. I was a bit concerned whether or not the Danish name would be butchered with the English language, but yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. Very much appreciated. I tried preparing myself for this conversation by first of all listening to all the prior episodes that you published, but also writing down 3 questions that I would like to lay in your direction. And I figured maybe it'd be better just to let it organically, grow.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm struggling with 3 different areas, so to speak. Some practical problems regarding my current business
Mm-hmm.
and some existential things
Okay.
as to how to navigate in a world that keeps getting continuously more and more digital when you're fascinated with analog and human experiences.
Mm.
I figured you have quite a lot of experience in that regard, since I remember also the College of Extraordinary Experiences. And I figured you might be able to provide maybe some hints or some inspiration as to how you did that navigation. Regarding the practical questions, I have some issues regarding the product that I'm trying to sell is, first of all, consultancy and teaching and lectures. I've been performing and being on stage for more than maybe 17, 18 years, and I've stood in front of more than 50,000 people.
Nice.
Thank you. And I've come to learn that a lot of consultant agencies, they actually need someone to help them move across the stage.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How to deliver their material in a more accessible way, because they have all the knowledge, they have the great PowerPoint shows, they have a lot of stuff's working out really well, but they need someone with maybe a more artistic background to help them cross the stage, to sort of reach the back end of the audience. And I know I'd be good at that. I've been teaching it before. I've done a lot of teaching in theater, and I've performed for thousands and thousands of people. So I figured this might actually work really well. However, when it comes down to selling this, it seems that I have a lot of challenges making people believe that it's actually worth investing in, because it's not a concrete thing that you can just say, okay, so we hire this consultant to help us how to consult other companies. How do we make more money from that? Is he worth the investment? And I'm really bad at speaking that corporate language, so I figured I need some assistance.
That sounds like a wonderful challenge. I very much look forward into diving into that, and I already have some ideas for you and some hard-earned experience from going through that journey myself. Plus, I've taught this exact thing, so I might be able to help you there. Let's start with the other one, though. Let's start with the existential digital. Let's start there, because that might also inform some of this, and let's save this juicy bit for a bit later in the conversation.
Okay. Well, I'm educated in musicology and dramaturgy, and I even studied gender studies in Norway, and I've been a musician for more than 20 years, and I've been an actor and performer for 15, 17 years. Well, first of all, I believe in radical honesty, so please stop me if something goes overhand. But I'm terrified with AI.
Mm-hmm. You're not alone. There are many out there. And I think even the ones, just so that even those of us who are not terrified are still terrified. We're just not terrified for the same reasons, right? I'm terrified of AI, but I still embrace it, and I think it's happening. So I think the question is not AI or not. If we skip for the moment the fact that most people have no idea what AI actually is, that it's not a question of AI or not, or being terrified of AI. It's being terrified of specific things with AI and realizing that no matter how much we plan, it's also going to go in ways we do not expect. So it's more of the waves are here. Do we want to try to learn how to surf and hope we don't get carried into the ocean? Or do we want to try to swim, which is pretty hard in big waves?
Mm.
But go on. Terrified of AI.
I agree with that statement because you can't really bring back the current development. And I don't intend to. That's not the point, but it's more regarding when you work in a creative field
Mm-hmm.
where you do a lot of work on a human basis and you suddenly see that okay, and playwrights are being switched to AI.
Ah.
Artworks are being replaced with AI.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Teaching, workshops, stuff like this is also increasingly being replaced by AI voices. And I recently saw was an article regarding that they're I can't remember the name of the firm right now, but an AI was being developed that could read your emotions from your facial expression and respond with an AI generated voice that would fit as to the expression, emotion that you're showing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently on my way to becoming a psychotherapist on the side, mainly to learn more about human interaction because that's what really interests me. And I read that a page called character.ai
Mm-hmm.
had, do you know it?
I've stumbled across it. I didn't spend a lot of time.
Okay. So for the listeners, it's basically that you can have it's sort of a chat GPT conversation, but it's with a character instead of just the chat GPT.
Sure, sure.
So if you want to have a chat with Putin, you can create a character that will respond like that. So it feels like you're having a digital chat with Putin. But they have a character called psychologist in that page. And apparently it had gotten, I think it was 2.5 or 3 million messages over just the course of 4 months. And it was the most popular character on the entire site.
Mm.
And I figured, okay, here we also have psychotherapists and psychologists and therapists in general being replaced with AI and a digital world. That's how we enter into the existential question about how do we actually navigate in this when we're people who have a high interest in human interaction and human value. Does it make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And it's interesting. So let's start with a little bit of controversy here, or controversy here. Let's start with the fact that when you say people want human interaction, let me give you an example. And this is I have I wouldn't say it's a privilege or a curse, but it's somewhere in between that I used to study philosophy at the university many years ago. Never completed a bachelor's thesis, never really got far with it, but did a couple of years of studying at the university. And I've always been interested in philosophy. And there's one of these classic philosophical dilemmas that is used in teaching. One of them is that you have a good friend and he moves to Australia and he communicates with his father via letters. And then at some point, the guy dies in a horrible accident. You're his friend in Australia, so you know about this communication with the father. The father is never going to come to Australia. This is pre-internet. There's not a video call. The guy was sending letters back and forth, and this the old man who's back in England, the only thing he has in his life really is his son, and that gives him that huge joy of getting these letters from Australia. Now, the son dies in a tragic mining accident, something like that. And you, the friend, are the one to take care of the remains of the house and so on. And you, of course, see all these letters and you know about these letters. And you are now faced with a terrible choice. Do you either write to the father and say his son is dead, knowing that the father is old and maybe not that many years left and it will crush him emotionally? Or do you pretend to be the son
Hmm.
and think it's not going to cost me that much? There's so many letters, I can match the writing. He doesn't write really deep and it's mostly the contact. It's not that he has a tone that's hard to copy. So you could easily fake it.
Hmm.
And what you'll be doing is you'll be replacing genuine human interaction with fake human interaction. But the father will never know, and he will live out the rest of his life, whether it's a couple of years or many, he'll live them out thinking his son in Australia is there, and he will be happier for it. Every day will be better because he'll be thinking of his son and he'll be getting these letters from time to time. The only one who'll know is you, because the rest of the world doesn't know, they don't care. you will know that you're lying to an old man to keep him happy.
This somehow reminds me of The Matrix.
Let's just say that when I saw the Matrix movie, the first one, first I thought I didn't know anything about the movie before I went in and saw it, so it was a little bit of a surprise. But I thought, oh, this is Hilary Putnam's Brains in a Vat from the '70s, exactly. And when I told other people that, they said, "What?"
Mm,
Because of course the philosophical text, which is about exactly that, brains in a vat, and if you are, can you then know you are in a brain in a vat, blah blah blah, is vastly less popular and well known than the Wachowski brothers action movie,
mm,
but it's exactly the same thought. And if they hadn't read that, I would be very surprised.
mm,
They just turned it into a story that was more than that, but had the same core thing. So back to us is we are faced with that dilemma, right? Genuine human interaction or what seems like genuine human interaction, but is in reality fake, except it makes people happier. Now, some people, when given that presented with that dilemma, they say, of course, I'd tell the father. And others say, I'd not answer anything and say it's not my problem. And some said, I'd pretend to be the son, of course. What does it cost me? Nothing. And it helps him. And I would feel good about it. There's different answers.
mm.
And once you see that that is a real thing and people can understand that there are different positions there, but the position of pretending to be the son is not a far out position. It makes emotional sense, right? It might be lying, sure, it's not radical honesty, but it might, in the bigger scheme of things, think, what does it hurt? And we can see what it gains. And today, what if it's AI? When you're communicating with somebody, and it's their secretary that answers, but in their tone of voice with their name on the bottom of the mail, do you know? Do you care? Would you care if you knew? Would you rather not really know? Whereas we're already there, right? We're already there in so many places. And sometimes it's people who have social media managers, or it's secretaries, or it's standardized templates, right? What if you write a letter to somebody that's a personal letter, except it's a rejection letter, so you copy paste them because it's a job application or something like that.
Mm.
And you give the same personal one to 100 different people without saying it's a copy pasted one. Is that okay? Is it okay to do it twice? Is it okay to say, you know what, I wrote this very nice invitation. Dear John, it was great working with you 10 years ago. And then the next day you're writing to somebody else and it's the same situation. You think, I'll just use the same text. Or do you change a comma so you feel good about it? Like all these sorts of gray areas, that's where philosophy is really annoying because it doesn't give you any answers. It just gives you more questions. And every time you think, oh, I've got it, then some annoying person comes along at the university, who's our teachers and each other, and says, aha, so that's where you're going with this. Let me tweak it a little bit, and now you're completely on thin ice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I learned by studying philosophy at the university are that it is very easy to have a philosophically sound and solid position, like radical honesty, because it makes sense, it's understandable, you feel good that you are now, at least you're on solid philosophical ground. In reality, most of our decisions, whatever it is, they're on these kind of like sliding scales of somewhere between perfect and completely terrible. Like I'm sure even you with your radical honesty, which I really respect, I'm sure even you sometimes omit things or twist them a little bit or say, yeah, I'm saying this, I'm being truthful here, but I could have been a little bit more truthful. Whether it's do I look fat in these pants or it's are you paying attention? And I'm sure that because you have this radical honesty, you're more honest than most. But I would guess that even you sometimes weigh your words in a way where you know what, I could have said it even more radically, but I chose to make it a little bit easier to swallow for myself and the other person.
Naturally, I don't want to be a bad person per se. I don't want to be an a-hole
Of course.
regarding having too much radical honesty. I very much value my diplomacy.
Hmm.
However, I find there's a big difference between being diplomatic about something and then lying about it. You know?
Of course.
Regarding, well, first of all, I really like that philosophical dilemma because yeah, you've probably already figured this out, but my first instinct was just like, of course I'd tell the dad, naturally. But that's also for me. having that or getting that pain is more valuable in the name of honesty than being lied to and maintaining a status quo of happiness. Because everything in life comes in waves. And I believe more in attending the factuality of life and what actually happens and paying attention to that, whether or not it's good or bad experiences, but it's still part of the human experience.
Sure.
And regarding the whole, you mentioned the letters and emails and stuff like that. I made a social experiment 5, 10 years ago, maybe, where I started writing handwritten letters to a couple of friends from high school that I hadn't seen in many years. And had I just sent an email or a message, I think the response would have been entirely different. But they were blown out of their mind that they actually received a 4 pages long handwritten letter, just, talking about life, talking about what's going on, and they could see my little my noodles and stuff. And the response was overwhelmingly positive. Whereas I think the whole authenticity element into that is also what fascinates me when doing theater, when doing lectures, when teaching, actually getting that connection into the honesty of the situation.
And that's a perfect segue for me, at least, because what you say there is to me less about genuine human interaction, right? An email can be just as genuine as a handwritten letter.
Sure, sure.
But it is very much about our perception of what is human and what is technology, and also what is meaningful and what is sort of too easy, right? And I'll give you two examples to kind of further what I mean by that, and then we'll move into your product space, because I think this translates nicely. And one is that we all know that we want to be seen, right? So one of the things that if you're in a service environment, let's say you are the concierge at a hotel, and in walks somebody who was there 10 years ago. This is an actual story from a friend of mine. His father came to a hotel and he'd been there 10 years before. And the guy looks up and says, "Ah, Mr. Anderson," which is even hilarious with our Matrix reference because his last name is Andersen, which is the Danish version of Anderson.
Nice.
"Mr. Anderson, would you like the same room as last time?" And he'd been there 10 years before, but the guy at the front desk had one of these, probably photographic memory. And he felt so seen and had an amazing experience. And of course, when he came home, he didn't talk about the sheets of the room or the lighting or the sofa or the bed. He talked about that guy and that experience of walking in, being seen, and somebody recognizing him and saying, "Do you want the same room as last time?" Super impressive, right? Incredible experience, very human. Now, let's say that under the counter today is a computer screen that tells the guy that this person has just walked in, and we have just RFID, whatever we used of technological voodoo to scan him to find out, maybe it's facial recognition, maybe it's scanning his credit card, maybe it's whatever it is that we now know. So it pops up. It's like the name tag, right? It's very impressive when the waiter remembers your name at your favorite restaurant. It's less impressive if you're wearing a name tag.
True.
And one of the things that technology allows us to do is it allows us to do things that are exceptional because they are technologically assisted. And a simple piece is here, a name tag. The difference between knowing everybody's names, which is impressive, and reading off a name tag, which is not that impressive, is a piece of technology, not like digital tech, but just like a note that's written on your name tag. Name tag is a nice piece of memory technology. And that means that suddenly if I read your name tag and I say, "Oh, Mathias, so good to see you again," then it's impressive if we haven't seen each other for 10 years. It's less impressive if you see me scanning your name tag, or even if you don't see it, but you know you're wearing a big name tag on your chest, then suddenly that's not an extraordinary experience. And when we talk about genuine human connection, often I find we tend to mix those up. That it's not about whether that the more the human does the thing, the more it's a human thing. And the more it's technology assisted or systems assisted, the more we feel it's not human. Where if I send you an email and that's easy and the spelling is correct and you get it instantaneously and it's in your mail program and you pops up, then it's the technology that does most of the work we feel, even if the words are deep and heartfelt. Where with your handwritten letter, just the fact that you went to the trouble of doing a handwritten letter makes them go completely backwards. Even if you just written, hi, good to see you, Gary, miss you, smooches, then it would be, oh, how exceptional. Where 40 years ago, getting a handwritten letter would be like, okay, yeah, that's a letter. Where's the content?
Hmm.
You just wrote hi, like what's in this? Where if you get an email, it's like, whoa, electronic post, and I can answer back immediately. Whoa. And I feel that sometimes we confuse the human for the extraordinary, and sometimes we confuse the technological for the extraordinary,
Hmm.
where these are actually not necessarily related. And I think that your letter is beautiful, right? I usually use the example of wedding invitations.
Hmm.
That imagine you get two wedding invitations. One of them is an email. Hey, Matthias, we'd love to see you at our wedding. It's this and this date. Can you come? And on an objective kind of side of things, it's really efficient. It pops up in the systems you're already using.
Hmm.
You probably use email or something like that. You can answer immediately without having to do anything differently. It's simple and it's easy to read because the font is uniform. It's not like a weird handwritten font that few people can read. It's constructed so that it's very readable. You can pick it up, you can get it anywhere. Like there's all these sorts of advantages. It's free and all this sort of stuff. And yet we see that as normal, commonplace, not really spectacular at all. Like they didn't really put in a lot of effort. But if you get a handwritten invitation by post, physical post, which is annoying to get because how often do you check your mailbox? Probably not that often. When you have to answer, then either you have to switch mediums and open your email to write them an answer, or you write back a handwritten letter back, which not only is annoying to write, you also have to, like, where do you have the paper? Where do you have the pen? Do you have envelopes? Do you have stamps at home? Then you have to find a mailbox where the email is like phone, click, 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 done, I'm coming. Right? So it's more annoyance. And yet, we know that if somebody goes to the trouble of sending us that handwritten card, that handwritten invitation, we're going to feel special. We're going to feel seen because we got something extraordinary. Where if it's just an email with an automated, dear, can you come? Click yes here. We don't feel special, right? We don't feel it's exceptional or ordinary. And the reason I say this is not just because I think it's impressive you did that, those 4-page handwritten letters. Of course, people reacted like that. Where if you'd done the same thing 40 years ago, they would just have said, okay, Matthias, nice letter, but I get a lot of letters. But that email you sent, wow. But it also means that whenever something shifts in society, a market opens up for counterculture, for the opposite.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've seen anybody who does like Polaroid camera art or these even more extreme, these people who buy like one use instant cameras that are not particularly high quality, like these cheap things that were everywhere in the 80s and now are a little bit more rare. And it only has 24 shots and it doesn't have any functions. And it's so much worse objectively than your iPhone camera
Yep.
in any way. And yet, there are people who do exhibitions with this instant camera art, and people who sell instant camera art, and people who become famous because they photograph only using the purity of instant cameras with bad quality. Where objectively speaking, if you take 1,000 pictures, you're going to become a better photographer than if you only take a few ones because you're going to get more training. It's easier to distribute. It's cheaper for people to buy the prints. It's all these things that are objectively true, but because the other thing is exception, it's different, it's hard, that makes it valuable.
Most definitely. I'm also guilty of actually doing that thing with the infant camera. So great example.
But that's perfect.
I just wanted to supplement with an anecdote I read yesterday. It was a guy who actually he went out for stamps, and his wife was like, "Well, you're not that poor. You can just stay at home and order a bunch of stamps to just arrive at your doorstep. You don't actually need to go down to the post office." And he pretends not to hear her, and he just walks out the door to still go and buy stamps at the post office. Because for him, by going there, by making that trip, he gets fresh air. He gets to meet a nice dog. He gets to smile at other people. He gets to, think about what a wonderful day, what a wonderful time that we live in. And he gets to move his body and he gets to talk with the cashier regarding The stamps, he creates an entire adventure out of going that extra mile. So whereas something could be interpreted as this is more work, like you say, when objectively the instant camera is not nearly as efficient, or as the product will never be as good as when you take 1,000 pictures with a really, really good camera. There's still a matter of also what kind of adventure or what kind of experience do you put into what you're doing? And are we really that focused on everything being about efficiency, keeping on track with our time schedule, that we forgot the small adventures?
I think that's part of it, right? That there is that the adventure part is a good reason for doing things that are not hyper efficient, but provide adventure. There's also the other part, which is that when you do something that is not easy, even if it's self-inflicted, not easy, then we find it more impressive. That if I see two paintings and I get told that one of them is painted by an artist, I say, okay, great. And the other one is painted by an artist who painted it only using his feet. I'm going to be more impressed with the second one, even though the outcome is the same, because there's more skill, or it's been a harder journey, right? That it's, even though the result may be the same, we appreciate the sacrifice or the challenge, but only if we know of it. If I see those two paintings next to each other and I don't know the story behind, then I'm just going to think, okay, these are two paintings. One of them is priced at $800, the other is priced at $2,000. Why would I buy the more expensive one? If I want to save money. If I want, of course, to tell my friends I bought the expensive painting, then of course, why would I buy the cheap one?
Mm.
But if, let's say I wanted to save money, then I would think, okay, but these are the same. Why is the other one more expensive? Then I'm told, well, this guy only paints using his feet. Oh, wow. I'd like the more expensive one because I like the story behind.
Mm.
And that means that whenever just like with your Instax photos, or your like instant camera photos, if I look at two photos from photographers and I don't know which one was taken with an instant camera, I'm going to judge them on which picture do I like best.
Mm.
Which one do I find has the best light, or the best motif, or the best whatever it is. Where if I know one of them was taken with an instant camera and the other one was taken by a high-end digital camera with a lot of photo editing, well, I'm going to be more impressed by the hashtag no filter one.
Mm.
And that means that to some of what you do, which I find impressive and fascinating, is that you do all this, the human connection stuff. And I think that you'll have an easier time selling that if you make it clear, either if you're fulfilling a need, we'll get back to the consultants and their presentation skills in a moment, but if you're doing your art, if you're doing the things, then instead of trying to make them easier and simpler and more and cheaper and that sort of thing, then find the people who want them because they're more impractical. There's an old friend of mine. Sadly, our friendship isn't what it used to be, to put it mildly, but there's a story he told that I sometimes quote him on, and that's from when he lived in Tanzania. And you could go out, you could go into the jungle and you could get a tour. You could go out kind of exploring. And there were two packages that a company talked about provided. One package was the $200 package, where you would get this guide and he would have a machete and he would do the chopping and set up the tent and do the food, and it would be a great experience. The other one was where they'd give you a machete and give you a tent and you do all the work yourself. That cost $700.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that everyone will pay more to do more of the work, but as you said it, right? Sometimes the work is the adventure.
Mm.
And if you're looking with some of what you're doing, some of your art, some of this incredible, very human, exceptional stuff, instead of trying to fit it into something that fits into this agenda of efficient and fast, and yes, I could have the art piece be slower. No, then do the opposite. Find the people who are not trying to buy the efficiency, but are trying to buy the adventure. There is a market out there. If you and I took over football, classic football, kick it with your feet, worldwide sport, and we said we are now the new commissioners for FIFA.
That'd be great.
The first thing we're going to do, and we're experienced designers, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reduce the games from 90 minutes to 60 minutes. because it's going to be less hard on the players. It's going to have more people who have time to watch it at home, which is the biggest place things are watched these days. It's going to be simpler on security. So if all these sorts of, there's going to be all these savings and all this efficiency because it's now only a 60-minute match, right? We'll have fewer injuries. We'll have, you'll need to book stadiums for less time, all this sort of stuff. And some people will say, oh, that's amazing. Now I can get my football in a smaller package that's essentially as good. And others will say, no way, this is terrible. On the other hand, if we said, aha, we listened, our 60-minute audio was terrible. We're now making all the matches 2 hours, 120 minutes instead of the standard 90. Then you'll have some people saying, oh, games were long enough already. Like my wife is killing me for watching 90 minutes of football every evening. And now it's 120. Oh, I have to kill that hobby. Or now I can't go to the game with my son because he loses interest. Or, oh, it now becomes the trip to the stadium. All this sort of, now you'll have some people who say, oh, couldn't you make it shorter? While there will be others who are like, yes, 2 hours of football. Why don't you make it 3? And the players will say things like, well, now we're playing 2. We're going to be more injured. It's going to be longer training. The coaches will want more compensation, all this sort of stuff. And that's not to say that the 90 minutes of football match is right now is perfect. Of course it's not. It's one of these arbitrary philosophical, this is what it is and it's fine.
Yep. Tradition based.
Where the reality is that if you made it shorter, it would draw in a different crowd and change the crowd you have. If you made it longer, it would draw in a different crowd and change the crowd you have. But the moment something is, the standard is a 90 minutes, then there are people out there where if you said, we're doing a 10-hour football game, some people would play it because it's 10 hours. And some people would watch it because it's 10 hours. Just like if you said you're doing 5-minute games, some people would play them and watch them because they're 5 minutes, but it wouldn't be the same people. And maybe some of them would be people who are right now watching the 90-minute version, and maybe it's a different group.
I really like that example actually regarding yeah, the different people attend, even though the format might actually be quite similar. Even something as arbitrary as time, as to how long that specific activity takes, can differ the audience. Yeah, because I remember I was hired to be a stage performer in a play that lasted from midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning.
Interesting.
And we had I think it was 5 or 10 audience members in total. And that we could fit maybe 150, 200 people in there, but only 5, 10 people showed up because the time was just so weird according to, the normalcy of how you usually attend a play. But the 5, 10 people that were there, they were invited out to breakfast the following morning when we were done, where we talked about, okay, how was this for you? And we were all dead tired, of course. And they responded very positively as to, this was something we've never experienced before. The time alone kind of made me fascinated. I need to watch this, because when will I ever get to see something that is from midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning? I mean, so yeah, it's basically just proving your point that there's something about how the format of the activity that you're doing can actually change the audience quite radically, even though that the activity in itself might be something that they recognize from something else.
Exactly, right. And there's a thing, just to keep on that, there's a thing that I tried many years ago at a Danish board game convention that has been running for years and years. And there's this hotel game where you play like hoteliers, buying up hotel chains and taking over each other. And it's pretty nerdy and it's pretty old school. But they'd created something they called Midnight. It's called Acquire. And there's this group of people, the Midnight Hotel Gang, they called themselves, and they would play Midnight Acquire. So they would play this specific board game and they'd play it at midnight. And it was really nerdy and there's ritual, and you could only join the Midnight Hotel Gang like as a member if you'd won 2 games of Midnight Acquire. So it was not that was only played this one time a year at this conference. So it was a really nerdy ritualistic thing, but of course people were drawn to it and like, oh, I get to play Acquire. Okay, cool. But I get to play this weird Midnight Acquire. The game was the same, but it was just presented in a different way. And when we looked at it, I think one of the things that is often overlooked, especially by people who control the whole business, like they're freelancers or entrepreneurs. They're not a big company where they need to get things approved from the top. I think that there is an undervalued discipline, which is reframing, whether it's reframing price or it's reframing format or it's reframing story, that just the simple thing. And there are so many people out there who want to pay you by the hour. Right? They want to get your hourly rate. Where what I tell people normally, if they want to get paid by the hour, I say, you can pay me by the hour, but I will talk very slowly and ask many questions. And then they go, oh, okay, so you're saying it's kind of stupid to pay you by the hour. I say, yes, it is actually, it makes no sense. All you're doing by paying me by the hour is giving me the incentive to be slower. Okay, so you should never pay people by the hour. No, sometimes it's pretty nice. If you have a shop that's open from 8 till 7 in the evening, from 8 in the morning till 7 in the evening, then it gives a lot of sense to pay people by the hour, because if they cut the time down by an hour, then your shop is not open anymore. So what I mean by that is that just the simple reframing of just how you're getting paid can mean a lot, right? That if some people say, you can get paid by the hour, by the project, by the kilometer, by the height, right? By the unit. And there's a huge difference if you're in a field where everybody's getting paid a certain way by just choosing to get paid a different way. And for a good example, perhaps one of the best out there is Google. Google, when they started, they did two things that were different than other search engines at the time. The first one was they made a very efficient search engine, very, very nice, but there were other search engines. But what they really did differently was they changed how we paid for advertising. Before Google came in with Google AdWords, the classic ad was you had a banner ad, usually like some kind of picture or text. And then if people saw it, then they would pay. And you would talk about how much would you pay for 1,000 views or per million views, that sort of thing. So when I went to your website and there was a banner for Harold's Shoe Store, then whenever somebody went to your website, they would see this small image that says, come to Harold's Shoe Store's best shoes in the business. And just like a newspaper or a book, you would pay for how many people saw it. You would pay for eyeballs. And that was how advertising was created and how it was paid for, because it seemed like magazine advertising or newspaper advertising. More people seeing it, of course, is more expensive. And what did Google do? They created the AdWords, which were essentially saying, you don't pay to see the ad, you pay when you click on the ad. So they changed how they were getting paid. And that turned out to be so successful that it built them the empire. And the combination of very efficient search engine and show ads for free, but pay when you click on them, turned out to be so lucrative that Google has grown into one of the giants of this world company-wise. And then they used some of all that money that was just crazy amounts of it coming in to say, what if we do more stuff that's free to draw them into our universe? It means that Google has had this philosophy of creating free, cool stuff that people could use. And then if they wanted to use it a lot, they could pay for an upgraded version, whether it was Gmail or it was their online services, and they made social media. Right now you have YouTube. There's all these sorts of things that the philosophy of, if you give people something that's free, that's good enough, that they can have a good experience using it for free, then there will be premium customers. And all of it was, for a long while, financed by AdWords, because it was just such a crazy money-making machine, because they changed the format of how do you pay for an ad. And it's whether it's going from a monthly subscription to a yearly one, or it's going from even more radical, going from paying for a pair of shoes to subscribing to being a shoe customer, right? Imagine you, instead of buying shoes, which is classic, right? We buy shoes, we pay for the shoes, we get the shoes. You could easily say that instead you subscribe, and then you go down to the shoe store and you treat it like a rental, like the shoes are now like your rental car, that you're paying a subscription for the shoes every month. And it means when you want new shoes, you go down there and change them. When you want to try a new thing, of course, they would require something of them in terms of cleanliness and reparation, but so does a rental car, right? There's nothing that says you couldn't create a shoe store that functions like a car rental.
I think I actually saw that somewhere where you could get a new pair of shoes every 6 months if you subscribe to a shoe store. They would send you a new pair every 6 months.
Bingo, right? And all this, how do people pay us, is a huge thing that is undervalued in how we sell things. Because most of us, especially in creative industries, are taught to do something and we learn how to do something. But when it comes to the whole finance side, the whole money side, the selling, then we tend to have an idea that this is how you sell it.
Mm.
Where in reality, there are many ways to sell a thing. I actually did, for those of you out there who are curious, I did an innovation keynote on pricing and different business models. It's one of my 100 innovation keynotes. You can Google it on YouTube, actually, if you want to, but where I give, for example, 10 different business models for how to sell shoes, just for shoes as an example. And part of that, I think, is something that is worth diving a little bit more into when you are doing stuff that is hard to sell because the world is changing, right? So these two factors. One is saying, what is it you're doing that's exceptional, and finding the people who want to pay for the exceptional instead of the efficiency, right? You make it harder or make it less efficient, and that's part of what you're selling, like the slow food, that sort of thing.
Mm.
Slow theater, right? Your morning performance for those people, amazing. And the second part is, how do they pay you? How do they want to pay you? What feels reasonable to them? And then the last part is, let's get back to the consultants and round off with that.
Yep.
Is that if you are teaching this stage presence skill to consultants and you're saying, oh, it's more like a soft skill and I know I'm good at it, but it's hard to get the numbers. Well, one of the things that consulting companies are really good at is they turn soft data into hard data. Because let's say love, you can't measure love, right? Hard to measure love, but you can measure the perception of love. So if I take you, Mathias, and I say, well, right now, if I ask you every day to write on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you love your sister? And then you write that down. It's not objective. It's your perception from 1 to 10. And some days you like her a lot, and some days you like her less. And then we take that and we use that for 30 days. And then we have a baseline, like a 7.4, maybe, because you like your sister quite a lot. And I say, Mathias, what if I can do some things for the two of you as a counselor or as an advisor that will take that number from 7.4 up to 8.5? We're still not measuring love, but we're getting a feeling for moving something in the right direction. And then you say, okay, I don't know how you can do that, but let's give it a shot. And then we do a thing, whether it's some therapy sessions or it's sending you guys out on some team building or it's a bit of philosophy or maybe it's just some good dinners. Then we do the same thing for the next 30 months. And suddenly it turns out that you end up with an 8.7. We haven't measured love, but we've measured your perception of love over a period of time and compared it to your perception over a period of time.
Mm.
And suddenly it makes sense. Where if you're saying, well, you love your sister 7.4 and I love mine 7.8, ha ha ha. Like that's completely useless because who knows how we're measuring it or what we're thinking of. Or it's comparing things that seem the same but really aren't. Where if you're comparing something that is pretty much the same, then you can measure stuff that's unmeasurable. And that means that when you take your consultants, you say, don't tell them this is a soft skill that you can't measure. Say that 83% of consultants, you can find these numbers, right? 83% of consultants feel that being confident on stage is a skill that they would like to get better at. What do? You make people more confident on stage. Are you part of the 83%? Sign up. If not, stay away. Okay. Or you could also take data that's even more persuasive and say, when you look at audiences, why does an audience dislike a presentation? Is it the skill of the presenter? Is it the subject? Is it whatever? And say, here is how many people care about the skill of the presenter. And if you look at what is it about the skill they care about, is it their voice or is it their knowledge or is it their body language? Well, then you find out there's probably some numbers out there that say that 46% feel that body language can be a turnoff for them in a presentation. And now you're saying, so half your audience cares about body language. How much training have you gotten in that? How confident do you feel that you're doing the right thing? And they say, well, I don't know. Good, I teach that.
Mm.
I've been an actor for 18 years. I've stood on stages for thousands and thousands of people. I can demonstrate to you what body language looks like when it's good and when it's bad. And then they go, wow. And suddenly they're at least considering.
Yep, because that's the strange thing when it comes to this exact type of work. I've had a lot of people see me on stage and comment that, wow, your stage presence is unbelievable. Like, we really love what you do. I get a lot of praise for what I do. But the translation from there as to actually getting customers willing to pay me to teach other people to do that, that's kind of where I'm facing difficulties at the moment. But I mean, when you bring up the data like that, I found a very good argument as well regarding that. I think it's the most common phobia on a global scale is public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So actually going in and working with that exact phobia and that exact problem, which is the most common thing on a global scale regarding phobias, that might also provide some value into why my product would be interesting.
Definitely. And there's also the framing of it, right? I can give you here three different types of audiences that could be just for that public speaking that could be interesting. You could say, I go out and I take people who are afraid. Here's the phobia. I help people deal with the phobia. Do you have that phobia or are you afraid? I will help you. Here's why I'm good. You could also instead say, are you really good on stage? Great. I'm exceptional on stage. Do you want to get even better? I'm really good. I can teach you to get even better. Or do you go on stage and you'd like to get better, but you know you're okay, but it's not a big thing, but you'd like to improve. These are three different groups, very different groups that need to be sold to in different ways because they're buying different things. But even if at the end of the day, a lot of what you're doing is the same, there's a huge difference, right? If you're catching me, I'm a professional speaker. I'm very confident on a stage. I'm actually quite good at it. But if you came and said, hey, Klaus, you're good on stage, but I have a few things up my sleeve that I think could make you even better, things from the formal school of acting that you haven't had access to. Do you want to do a session? It's going to cost you 200 euros. I might say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, sure. Because you can do stuff I can't. I know. Where if on the other hand, you came and said, hey, Klaus, I teach people how to become good public speakers. Then I'd say, that's great for you, Matthias. How about you take that and stuff it up where the sun doesn't shine because I am one already. And by the way, I teach people how to sell and you need that, right? Where not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're hitting the audience the wrong way.
Mm.
And if you're saying, hey, I make people confident on stages, I make you a really great public speaker, and the audience, the ones you're talking to are thinking, if I could just get on the stage without throwing up, I'd be happy. They don't want the A game, they just want to be in the game.
Yeah.
And you're then scary because you're like, I can teach you how to be a professional actor. Like, yeah, I just want to be on stage, and you're freaking me out just by your sheer intensity and charisma. So you're not the right one for me. I want somebody who's better than me, but not unbelievably much better. And here your expertise is going against you, right? Because they're thinking he doesn't even know what nervousness looks like.
That's a good point. I don't think I really considered it that way, that even the target audience would be that segregated. But I mean, of course they are. When you put it up like that, of course the people with intense public speaking phobias would be an entirely different audience than already established consultants that are usually on stage, maybe every day, teaching other people about specific subjects. I mean, in a way, it's so clear, but I don't think I thought about it that way before.
Thank you for that. And I think part of it is that it's easy to forget that elite athletes have coaches too, but they don't have coaches who say, I can teach you how to kick a ball, Cristiano Ronaldo. They say, hey, Cristiano, when you do that corner kick when you're running top speed and it's the 80th minute and you're tired, I've seen that there you lose 5% accuracy. I can help get that down to 2. Now we're talking, right? So when you're talking about segregating the audiences, the more you are okay with like micro targeting. If you say, I'm Matthias, I've been an actor for this many years, I teach people how to be on stages. Okay, now it's interesting to everybody, but it means it's not for me because I'm not everybody. If you say, I'm Matthias, I've been an actor for 18 years, I teach top level public speakers to get some extra formal skills that they might not have. Okay, that's me. Or you say, I teach consultants how to make presentations better. Okay, that's interesting. But if you say, I teach consultants how to use body language to be more persuasive in pitches, there is no end to how specialized you can be. The problem is that the more specialized you are, the harder it is to find the people you're hitting.
Yeah.
If you say, I've created a business where I teach Klaus Oster how to do public speaking, then even if I've never heard of you, I'd at least check it out. If I found that website, I'd say, this is for me. Wow, right? Problem is, except when I drop by, it's a very small market.
That's a good point. I like that idea of just accessing a website like this was created for this guy. What?
What? Like you might not trust them, you might not hire them, but you'd at least give it a look.
Yeah. Just out of the sheer weirdness of it all. Good example.
So Matthias, we're thank you for that. We're getting to the wrap-up point here.
Yeah.
I want to do two things. One is the customary thank you, and that is no less heartfelt for it being standard. That thanks for bringing this to me, and thanks for sharing it with people out there. Let's hope that we can inspire some people with our conversation. The second part is I want you to think of three things you take away from this conversation, three insights or provocations or things you might do differently.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it. I know that I'm in a very solid, good group of people that you've interviewed so far, and I really like being a part of that. So thank you so much for having me on. I think first of all, I actually really enjoyed the philosophical question regarding what would you do, the whole letters to an old man question. I very much enjoyed the perspective of the whole, if we were to take over football and we limit the time to 60 minutes, what would happen? As to instead of looking at it as limitations and changing a tradition which would make it worse, it's instead looking at, okay, what opportunities would this create and how would the market change from what we're doing? As a side note, I have to say I really admire your way of thinking in opportunities instead of limitations. I think that's one of the things I look the most forward to with talking to you, because I've heard that before, that you always think in new ideas instead of saying, "Oh yeah, that won't work." You're still thinking like, "Okay, interesting. Maybe if we pitch it like this, if we do like this." I really enjoy that approach. It's very inspirational to me. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And lastly, I think the third thing is the whole convincing myself that of course there is an audience to what I do. I mean, even that we're in an ever-changing world, the more, as you mentioned, the more specific you make it, the more specific the audience will be as well. So it's a matter of making this small cube of intensity as to who am I targeting and how will I market what I do to those people in a way that doesn't seem like I'm forcing something down their throat, but that I'm actually helping them improve what they already have. Yeah, I really like the examples you made regarding, yeah, I can teach Klaus Hoste to stay on stage, and like you can show it with some don't shine because you already do that. But instead of thinking it, okay, I can actually improve what game you already have, I can actually make that maybe 5% better, even if you're on tour and if you're tired or something, I can still help you maintain an even better performance. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. Thank you for those three, Tiz, and thank you for being with me on this.
Thank you.
And thanks to all our listeners out there. This has been the Innovation Coaching Podcast. You've heard Mathias Hvidbj and me, your host, Klaus Hoste. Thank you for listening.